Mic check, mic check, mic check, mic check.
World. Ooh, then where you come from? Yes, it is not. Yeah, here's a chance to make it. Yeah, if we focus on our goals, you can dish it, you can take. Yeah, just remember that you've been told. It's a different world. Eh, it's a different world. Hey, then where you come from? Ooh, then where you come from?
Mine has been absolutely fantastic. We apologize for tuning in late, but difficulties that we have no control over. But if we can get through this, everything will be all right. Because guess what? They had an earthquake in Columbia, South Carolina last week. An earthquake in Columbia, South Carolina. A few technical difficulties in Miami. Who can complain? Not us, not at all. But the week has been great for me. As usual, we clearly understand that we make the things happen that we want to happen when we make them happen for the way we want them to happen. And that every day is our day, and if we are blessed to get up, then we should take full advantage of the day that we're blessed to get up in. This weekend, of course, was one of those special weekends because it was Mother's Day weekend. And Mother's Day weekend has a very significant relevance to what we are attempting to do here at the Urban League. We are highly concerned about the status and the future and the untold power of the women who give birth to the children that we're trying to save. So we really celebrate Mother's Day for us every day. But at the end of the day, we also know that we've got to build the strong family unit. And mothers by themselves simply cannot do the job that needs to be done in terms of having the children, in terms of raising the children. So while we understand the power and the importance of celebrating Mother's Day, we celebrate it with the understanding that we've got to do everything within our power to make sure that we restore the person who provided the sperm, that provided the child the opportunity to be born. That if we don't celebrate Family Day, then we end up just celebrating Mother's Day. And it does not have the significance nor the importance that it ought to have. So I'm going to spend this afternoon talking about when things were colored. You know, I always say that if you want the rest of your life to be the best of your life, then you've got to live the rest of your life like colored people live the worst of their life. A couple of weeks ago, we took a tour and we carried some very important, powerful, dedicated people from our board and from the community at large on a tour of the environment in which we labor in, the environment in which we're trying to change. We wanted them to see the things that we were doing. We wanted them to understand the things that we were proposing to do. We wanted them to know that we were going to do it with them, hopefully not without them. However, the ability for us to be successful did not rest with what they were going to do, but rest with what we were not going to continue to endorse not being done by us. That our future rests with us, that we do not blame anybody for where we are, And we do not expect anybody to design where we're going. That is our responsibility. That is our challenge. But as we look back when things were colored, we know that we did what we were supposed to do, survive what we had to survive, simply because of the fact that in spite of racism, in spite of segregation, in spite of personal degradation, uh, people of color were able to survive. And when we look back at the survival formula, there were some things that were quite clear for us as to how we were able to get over, in spite of how they treated us, but more importantly, how we treated ourselves. When we look back, we know that at the crux of our survival was a strong family unit, a man and a woman working together to have a life better than the one that they may have inherited, to make a life for the children that they brought into this world. So when you look at our document, this is our transformation document, a couple of hundred pages of things that we are going to do, not that we hope to do, not that we wish to do, not that we want others to do with us or without them, it's going to be done. This is our transformation document to bring about equity and parity for the children in Liberty City. And at the crux of our ability to do this is building strong family units. Building strong family units. If you look at our history as a people, we were able to survive and thrive in spite of circumstances because we had a strong family unit. Strong family unit during segregation, degradation, humiliation was described as a man and a woman who were married. Make it very clear. Who were married. A man and a woman who were married, who assumed the awesome responsibility of carrying out those vows that they espouse on their wedding day, who were prepared to work together to make life better for themselves, to make sacrifices when necessary, to postpone certain personal aggrandizements in order to make sure that the children had what they needed. And in the process of doing that, made sure that the children respect themselves, respect something greater than themselves called God, and also respected others. A man and a woman who said that it is our responsibility to do what we've got to do in order to make sure that our children have a life better than ours. A man and a woman who believed that they would make sacrifices for the moment in the best interest of the future of themselves and their children. A man and a woman who believed that if we worked together, did what we had to do, then things could be better for our children. A man and a woman who believe simply that it is our responsibility, granted to us by the God that we serve, to do what we have to do in order to make sure that our children grow up to be happy, healthy, and successful. For we brought them here, and therefore it is our obligation and our responsibility to make sure that the journey from birth to death is grounded in what we believe is best for them and the sacrifices that we would make for them. So we always understood that at the end of the day, when the family is strong, when a man and a woman are committed to do what they have to do, believing in a God or someone greater than themselves as they do it, then things can be done. So we celebrate this past weekend Mother's Day. When we look at the family, the roles of responsibilities, the roles of development as relates to happiness and success for the family. While it is a partnership, there are distinct roles that each member of that quote unquote couple play. And That is why we celebrate Mother's Day. That is why we celebrate Father's Day. We thoroughly believe that family is therefore important. And we believe that as we design our program operations for the future, as we talk about transforming the village into a place where everybody is happy based on their own desires and needs and abilities and willingness to work hard, make sacrifices, postpone certain indulgences, that they can be happy. That if we do what we're supposed to do as parents, as mothers, as fathers, as husbands, as wives, then things can be better. That the external circumstances, be they quote unquote racism, be they segregation, be they deprivation, be they poverty, all of those things can be overcome when two people work together and carry out their duties and responsibilities. So when things were colored, we understood that. And we celebrated Mother's Day and we celebrated Father's Day. And when we look back over the years, there are two celebrations that seem to get more attention than any other celebrations. That is Christmas Day, the day that our Savior, Lord Jesus Christ was born, and Mother's Day. Now, everything else comes in third or fourth, but those 2 days are highly important. Because when things were colored, mothers were very important in the family development, in the family progress, and family success. So this evening, I want to talk about the power of mama. I want to dedicate this conversation to 2, 3, 4 women that I know are powerful mothers. Shirley Johnson, Geneva Lewis, Gloria Gator, Mary Lou Fair. Powerful, powerful women. And Lola Carey. Powerful, powerful women who clearly portray for me the very epitome of why we celebrate Mother's Day. Mothers are granted the awesome responsibility of not only bearing and carrying the children until they are birthed, but they also are given the opportunity to nurture them and to raise them. Because when things were colored, the men simply provided the seed, sometimes the discipline, but they worked. They left the raising of the children to the mothers. But the mothers knew that they could do that because they had men in their lives, the fathers of their children and their husbands, who assumed the responsibilities of providing them with the material things that were necessary, the guidance and the dedication and the commitment that was needed in order for them to be caring adults. So it's not by accident, but by cultural production that mothers have the highest love and devotion of the two parents. It's not by accident, but clearly by design. Probably the only other day that gets more attention in the days of celebration on the yearly calendar, other than the day our Lord Jesus Christ was born, which is Christmas Day. This is Mother's Day. I can't think of another day that gets the kind of attention that Mother's Day gets, aside from Christmas Day. And that's because it was my mama that gave me when I needed to be sitting in this chair. It was my mama who provided me with the sense of right and wrong that has guided me throughout my life. It is my mama who taught me what should be and what should not be in terms of what I do, when I do it, to whom I do it with, how long I do it. And those guiding principles came from her, not because my father did not have them, but because my father delegated them in terms of roles and responsibilities to the mother. So when I think about those mothers that I name, I often think about them as I celebrated this past Mother's Day because they were simply the same in terms of how they behaved, their expectations, their beliefs, and their expectations of others as they interacted with their children. Mother's Day is the day. So, what did I learn from my mother that made me want to celebrate her? Why is it that I miss my mother more than I miss anybody who's ever been in my life? Why is it that we celebrate Mother's Day with a passion? You can't get into a restaurant on Mother's Day. You can't find flowers after a certain period leading up to Mother's Day. The cards are gone. The candy has been bought up. Why is it that mothers are so important in terms of celebrating? And it's very simple. Who kisses you on the spot that it hurts when you fall down and makes it feel better? Who holds you when you've eaten too much watermelon and your stomach is hurting and rubs it and makes it go away? Who do you run to when you're young and your big sister or your big brother hits you? You don't run and tell your father. You run to your mother. So because mothers are in the environment to provide the love and the care and the sensitivity that is necessary to interact on a positive base with another human being, somehow through what we social workers call osmosis, they become near and dear to our heart. Mother knows. Mother cares. Not that fathers don't know. Not that fathers don't care. But simply because of the dividing of duties and responsibilities as they are pertaining to raising children, mothers are given the responsibility of exhibiting that, of making sure that children understand that it does exist. And therefore, mothers raise the children. Fathers just spoil them. Mothers give direction. Fathers acquiesce. I can remember when I would ask my mother, could I go to a certain place? And she would say, well, I don't really know. Go ask your father. Well, I knew what that was. I knew I was not going because I knew they had worked out the system that she would pretend that he had some authority over raising the children. But they had worked out a system. So when I got to my father, I would say, Papa, Mama said for me to ask you, could I do X, Y, Z? So he said, no, you can't do that. Well, I knew that's what she was going to say anyway, but she didn't let him say it to give me the appearance that he was in charge. I knew who was in charge. When things were colored, mothers were smart. They made the men in their life feel very important. Even though they were in charge, they never tried to put on the pants. And because they never did, the dichotomy between duties and responsibilities was never confused. My mother, like all mothers, demonstrated that there was no sacrifice she would not make on behalf of nurturing, growing, and developing their children. I can remember when I was growing up and I wanted to have certain kinds of clothes to be part of the best dressed boys in high school. My mother wore a black coat for 4 winters. She wore a black coat for 4 winters until it turned brown. But I got a new winter coat every winter. She made the sacrifice on behalf of her children. Mothers do that. Mothers do that. Mothers teach us right from wrong, even though others know what is right and what is wrong, but want to be liked by us, want to be cherished by us. And as a result of that, they simply won't take the risk of not being liked by us. So mothers would tell us things that we did not want to hear, make us do things that we did not want to do. And then when we grow up and look back, we know that it was the exact right thing to be done. And that is how we look back. And on Mother's Day, we remember those great things. So we come to Mother's Day and we look around and we celebrate. But as we look around and we celebrate, we know that we cannot celebrate because too many mothers had the biological capacity to be mothers, but never had the psychological socialization experiences that allowed them to act like mothers. It's a big difference. You can have children biologically, but not have the psychological capacity to raise them. It is those mothers who had both that get celebrated with zeal on Mother's Day. Mothers who simply have children and then allow those children to grow up on their own. Mothers who simply have children and allow them to do whatever they want to do, whatever they want to do with it. End up never developing respect and love from their children. So when Mother's Day comes, it's just another day that somebody else celebrates. Sometimes we try to pretend that it is a very important day by simply on this day saying we're going to take you to dinner. But those of us who know that mothers are important, those of us who cherish our mothers, celebrate them every day. And we just simply put the icing on the cake for everybody to see on Mother's Day. My mother has been deceased now for almost 50 years. But I suggest to you that every day of this life, I say hello to her. I suggest to you that I do that at the tender age of 82, as I did it when I was 12 years old. I suggest to you that I'm very clear about why I stand where I stand, why I sit where I sit, and why I am what I am. It is because of her. So for those of us who've had that kind of experience with our mothers, and those of us who believe and understand the importance of that kind of experience, not only must we cherish that, but we have an obligation to try to recreate that for the village. So that is why in this book, when we talk about transforming the village, that is why we understand that the transformation process begins with the reconstructing of what family is. That is why we understand that in this book of operation, to restore value to education in the village, that it starts with the belief of the parents that it is their responsibility to make education important. So I celebrate Mother's Day because my mother understood that. I celebrate Mother's Day because ever since I can remember, there was a set of encyclopedias in my house. And I'm 82 years of age, born in 1939, finished high school in 1957, finished undergraduate school in 1961, finished graduate school in 1963. But I grew up in a house where there was a set of encyclopedias. So I celebrate the fact that my mother and my father understood the power of education. I grew up in a house where reading was simply what we did. My father read the paper every morning as we prepared to go about our respective duties. He was going to work, and I was going to school. My mother worked at night. I'm the last of 8 children. I'm the only one at home. He's the only one up in the morning with me because of reasons stated. He read the paper, and I ate my breakfast. As I grew older, he began to share the paper with me. He started out by sharing the comics with me. Mutt and Jerry, Grundy and Dagwood, Superman, Superwoman. He shared the funnies with me. As I grew older, he shared the colored section of the Journal and Sentinel paper with me. Because back in those days, not only did we live a segregated life, but we also had a paper that had a segregated process of communicating with the public. There was a big paper called the Journal and Sentinel, but in the Journal and Sentinel, there was the colored section. And the colored section was tantamount to having a Miami Times inside of the white newspaper. And it talked about that news that was important to the colored people in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So he shared that with me. As I grew older, we continued to have breakfast together, and he graduated me to other parts of the paper. And then finally, we began to have conversations about the paper and things that were in the paper. So I read simply because of the fact that I grew up in a house where reading was important. I read simply because of the fact that not only was reading was important, but communicating was also part of reading, because you just didn't read, you had to explain and talk about what you read. So Mama and Daddy gave to me and all of my siblings the value of understanding and appreciating reading. So I celebrate on Mother's Day. Not only was she my mama, but she also gave me those things that I would need to make me the man that I am today at this point. Not too many of us can say that. In fact, part of what is missing in our village is the fact that too many of us cannot say that. Part of that which is missing in our village is today that too many of my mothers simply have to assume the awesome responsibility of not only bearing the children, but rearing the children by themselves, or according to the expectations of some federal agency as to how it should or should not be done. So on Mother's Day, we have to celebrate not only the mother, but we must also condemn the circumstances that allows women simply to have birth to children, but not have the capacity to raise those children the way they should be raised. That's important to us. As I celebrated this Mother's Day, I was challenged to rethink what we have got to do. For example, you may have seen it on my Facebook page, a couple of pictures of celebrating a luncheon that we had at our adopted school, celebrating Mother's Day. Over 60 mothers came for the luncheon celebration. Now, one of the questions that I had to raise when we saw the number that was coming is, this is at 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock in the middle of the day. Are these women employed or unemployed? How do you come to a Mother's Day celebration in the middle of the day when all of the other mothers are going to go come Sunday? Why is it that my mothers in Liberty City can come in the middle of the week to celebrate a day that's going to come at the end of the week in the middle of the day? And why is it that come this Sunday in all of the restaurants I'm not going to see these mothers? Why is it that we celebrate differently the same day? And I submit to you and suggest to you that that happens simply because of the fact that mother definition in Liberty City is different than mother definition in Coral Gables by the Sea. I suggest to you that our mothers in Liberty City do not have the power or the wherewithal to be what they've got to be simply because of the circumstances that they have no control over makes them what they are. I suggest to you that when we celebrate Mother's Day in the middle of the day with mothers who are of that age who should be working, then we need to re-examine what we're doing to mothers before Mother's Day and what we've got to do for mothers after Mother's Day. And our goal going forward, as we outline in this book, is to make sure that those mothers that we're working with have an opportunity to not only to bear the children, but to provide that which is needed for the children. And part of that which is needed for the children is to give them the role model of expectation. That's simply to have the children and not be able to provide for the children. To simply be able to biologically produce the children and not be able to provide for the children does not give you what you need to have in order for those of us who celebrate Mother's Day to want to celebrate it. I wonder how many of those mothers who were present at our Mother's Day luncheon at the school in the middle of the day would so be honored this past Sunday by either the father of the children, the husbands of the children, or the community at large. I wondered how many of those mothers would be so honored. I doubt if many of them were. I doubt if many of them were. If my past experience in working with female heads of household is correct, if things have not changed significantly, then I would suggest to you that many of them were not. We have a history of trying to make sure that we provide those mothers with what they need in order to fulfill the roles of mothers to their fullest. It is not by accident, but by design that we are the largest provider of affordable housing for female heads of households. We decided that that would be our contribution to the growth and the development of the children that were brought into this world by mothers in Liberty City. When we started our thrust some 25 years ago to provide housing for female heads of households, we wanted to make sure that we understood who, what, why, and under what circumstances we were going to do that. So our first housing development for female heads of households was called M&M Maison 1. And then we built M&M Maison 2. We knew that providing housing for mothers was not the first step. It was the beginning of the development of a relationship. We knew that if we provided housing but did not provide an environment of new behavior expectations, that providing housing was simply not enough. We did a survey and found out that 81% of all the households in the city were headed by women. We also did the income analysis and found out that 85% of those women had jobs, and that the bulk of them not only had one job but had two jobs. We found out that as we analyzed how they spent their quote unquote net income, over 50% of it was going for rent. That bundled rental agency and other landlords were simply prostituting them to the fullest extent at their own expense. So that's why we got into affordable housing, because we knew that one of the key ingredients for building strong Black family units was having housing that you could afford that would meet the needs and the composition of your family. So that's why we did that. But we also knew that providing housing was not the only thing that we must do. That if we were going to lift up mothers to where they ought to be, then we had to also provide them with a new set of expectations. So when we began to work with mothers, we made it very clear that we would give you this new affordable housing that is second to none. In fact, our first affordable housing design won a national award for its design. One had never seen anything like that in the inner city throughout these United States. But we also said that if you live here, you've got to change your behavior. If you're going to celebrate Mother's Day with us, then you've got to behave like we want you to behave. So we made it very clear that you can have children, but you got to create an environment that allows you to raise those children in a fashion that makes sense. So we said to them that if the father of the children is not married to you, then the father of the children is not on this lease, and he cannot be in this house overnight. Folks said, well, you can't do that. That's not fair. Well, it is fair because they had the children, but I was behaving like the daddy. I was providing the housing. I was providing the job opportunities. And I had a right to assume my responsibilities as the father of the children of the 36 units. Of course, ACLU and others said you can't do that. You are violating their personal rights, and therefore we are going to sue you. I said, well, do what you want to do when you want to do it. But my mama told me that if you have children and the man is not in the house, then the man should not be in the house until he's prepared to not only have the children, but also take care of the children. And if he's going to take care of the children, it means that he does not show up when the check comes. He shows up every day. He lives there every day. He helps you raise the children. He does what he's supposed to do in order to make sure that the children grow up to be healthy, wise, and successful. Women can have them. They can't have them by themselves. And they should not be forced to raise them by themselves. So my mothers who came to the luncheon, I wondered where the men were. And that is why today we had this great conversation with my man-up team. Because as I said to them today, that our first challenge as we roll out what we're going to be doing in the village is to find the brothers, shame the brothers, challenge the brothers, make them be more than providers of the sperm, make them be men, make them celebrate Mother's Day every day, not just once a year. Make them understand that if she was good enough to have your children, she's good enough to work with you in raising your children. Make them understand that it is their responsibility and their obligation to celebrate Mother's Day every day, not just once a year, but make her feel like she is important, that she is the woman that you love, that she is the mother of your children, and that you are her partner, and that you brought them here together, and you will raise them together to be what you want them to be, not in spite of, not because of the color of their skin or the condition in which they find themselves, but simply because it is a God-given right thing to do, and that you are prepared to do that. So on this Mother's Day, that is the environment that we have got to create. So we talk about going forward and celebrating Mother's Day. And we will do that, but we will do that because we have changed the playing field. We're going to make sure that we lift up men on a year-round basis. We're going to make sure that we not only lift up men, but we challenge men. We're going to make sure that we're not going to lift up men and challenge men, but we're going to dare men not to be men. Too often, brothers just allow brothers to be sorry men. Too often, brothers know that what other brothers are doing, they should not be doing. Too often, because we don't do what we're supposed to do in terms of checking them, then they do what they can do. I can remember that when things were colored, if you didn't take care of your children, you were not considered to be a man. If your children were barefooted and you had on the latest shoes, and here in Miami they call them Stacey Adams. Back in my hometown they called them Johnny Bulls. It was the shoe that you had to wear, and you knew that you were grown, that you were a big boy when you had some Johnny Bulls or some Stacey Adams. Well, men need to define what is the credential from the transference from boyhood to manhood. And that can only happen if the man is in the environment to model the behavior that is necessary for the transformation. If you allow that environment to only be dominated by the female, then no one should be surprised that the boys don't grow up to be what they should be, because they don't have any role models that demonstrate what is the good behavior versus the bad behavior. And the good behavior versus the bad behavior, not by design what is acceptable in the street, but by what is tolerated in the household. You notice I said tolerated, because I knew in my mama's house that my daddy was partnership. That it was not what was accepted. It was what was not going to be tolerated. And while we did not understand why they did what they did, when they did, to whom they did it to, as we look back on Mother's Day, those of us who celebrated Mother's Day celebrated the understanding of all of the things that we did not understand when we were children, that made us great persons as adults. We didn't understand when the mother said you would eat it before it eats you. You just wanted the good stuff. But it's because that they knew what was the best stuff to grow you into being a healthy human being. I celebrate Mother's Day. And when I first came here, my girlfriends used to say, well, you know, you're a strange fellow. You must be from North Carolina or some other place. I say, I am from North Carolina. I said, why you say that? Because you eat everything. I said, well, I eat everything simply because of the fact that at my house, there was no menu. Nobody passed out a menu and said, choose what you'd like to have for dinner. Choose what you'd like to have for breakfast. There was no menu in my house. It was simply, it's time to eat. And you dropped whatever you were doing. Nobody had to say that twice. Mama said, it's time to eat. Not hollering over the radio, not calling out the back door, because you knew that at a certain time, your body told you there's time to get to the backyard, get ready to be called in to eat, because you knew every day by the time the sun set, that mama would be saying, it's time to eat. And when you came to the table, there was no, give me my stuff. There was no getting my stuff and going back to where you were, watching television on the front porch, out of the stool. It's time to eat. And there was a place where you went because it was time to eat. And there was something called a table and chairs. One of my mothers that I met earlier on in my sojourn to save the mothers in Liberty City had 8 children living in Pokemon. But she had no kitchen table, no dining room table. How do you have 8 children living in Pokemon, no kitchen table, no dining room table? How you do that? So are you surprised that the children eat whatever they want to eat, when they want to eat it, where they want to eat it, as long as they want to eat it? They are products of their environment. So mothers who understand that have order, not only in terms of raising their children, but in growing their children. Mothers who understand that have order in raising their children and growing their children, and that's why their children celebrate them on Mother's Day, because they're able to look back over from which they have come and see how they not only love them, but they raise them. And when you make children do what you know is best for them, even though they don't want to do it, and then they do it and then grow up and say that that was right, that's what they celebrate on Mother's Day. Nobody celebrates a mother who allowed them to do whatever they wanted to do, whenever they wanted to do it, who never challenged them and defined what was right and what was wrong. Nobody celebrates that. Nobody misses a mother who never said to them that I love you. Nobody even thinks about a mother who has never knowingly made a sacrifice that you were aware for you. It is those mothers who do what they have to do in order to get what they need to have for their children, in spite of circumstances that they do not control. It is those mothers that we celebrate on this day who made those unselfish sacrifices for our children, for their children. It is those mothers who said that in spite of those things that I have no control over, those things that I do have control over, I will control them in the best interest of what is best for my children. Those mothers can celebrate it. Those mothers never die. Those mothers set the example that all other children that belong to them follow. I can remember saying, when I get grown, I ain't gonna raise my child that way. I know that those mothers that I mentioned earlier, Shirley Johnson, Gloria Gaynor, Lola Carey, Geneva Lewis, Mary Lou Fair. I bet you, if any of you all's siblings and yourself are listening, I bet you, like me, say, when I get grown, I ain't gonna raise my children this way. When I get grown, I'm gonna treat my children differently. And you end up doing exactly the same thing that you said you would never want to do. Because you had to admit that even though you didn't understand it, it was the most beneficial thing that happened to you in your own development. So Mother's Day, we celebrate Mother's Day like it used to be celebrated when things were colored. When things were colored, Mother's Day was second only to Christmas Day. Mother's Day was the day. And we celebrated it with vim, vigor, and vitality. We celebrated it with the highest order of symbolism. If your mother was alive and well, you had a red flower in your prayer. If your mother was deceased, you had a white flower in your prayer. But the message was, alive or dead, or she was the mother to be celebrated. When things were colored, mothers were held in the highest esteem. And all good mothers, based on their public behavior, were left to the judgment not of mankind, but of Godkind. Mothers were important then. Mothers are important now. Mothers will always be important because of the role that they play in the biological production and the socialization of the children once they come into this world. And as we celebrate Mother's Day, we can afford the luxury in the village of doing it once a year. We have to figure out ways and means regularly to say to the mothers in the village who every day do what they can, when they can, as much as they can, to provide for the children, in spite of, if not because of, the absence of the male. So as we challenge men to do what they've got to do, we've got to also upgrade our behavior of response, of supporting the women who do it in spite of the circumstances. But we cannot continue to accept that as the appropriate behavior in our community. We have to understand that in many instances, if not in most instances, most of the things that are broken in our community are broken because we do not have the strong family unit. They're broken because we do not have a man and a woman in the house, guided by a set of principles, godly grounded, that says that we will do what we've got to do in order to make sure that the children grow to be healthy and responsible. We don't have in the village enough men who don't measure their self-worth by simply how many women they can impregnate, who bring children into the world and then expect the government to take care of it, who allow their children to be murdered in the streets and then blame the police for shooting them when they've never even taken time out to try to raise them, to show them how not to be shot. And then we sit back and we say that it's somebody else's fault when we know that it is our fault. We sit back and say that we're going to do better, but we never do better. We allow our children to continue to see us do worse. So it's our obligation and our responsibility to say that Mother's Day is the day that we all will celebrate, not once a year, but every day of the year. That we have an obligation and a responsibility to understand that when we celebrate Mother's Day every day, then every day mothers get stronger and children get better. When we include the person who provided the sperm to fertilize the egg to give birth to the child in that celebration, then we increase the likelihood of the celebration of Mother's Day becoming a family affair year-round, as opposed to simply a yearly affair one day out of the week. So I want to celebrate mothers every day. I've challenged my man up group to figure out how we do this on a a regular basis. The first thing we're going to do is begin to galvanize by shame, challenge, coercion, humiliation, degradation, the men who continue to have children and expect the government or me to take care of them. That they should be ostracized, they should be condemned, their behavior should not be tolerated. And when the brothers say, if you ain't taking care of your children, you can't hang out with us. When the brothers say, you're not my homie, because you're not a man. That simply being able to have babies don't make you no man. It makes you a procreator of the species, but it doesn't make you a man. That there are responsibilities that go along with the ability to provide the seed. It's called providing the care, the leadership, the dedication, the commitment that's necessary in order for the children to know that it took two of y'all to bring us here. It's going to take two of y'all to make sure that we maximize our being here. It was two of y'all who decided that you cared enough about each other to have children. It's going to take two of y'all to demonstrate that you had us and you care enough about us to make the sacrifices to make us better human beings. It's going to take the two of you to go to PTA meeting, to say to the principals and to the teachers and to all that these are our children and we expect you to educate them. It's going to take two of you to set the example of what is good and what is bad for the children that you brought into the world. It's going to take two of you to believe in something greater than yourself. Whether you call it Yahweh ben Yahweh, Muhammad Ali, P. Willard Fair, but it's got to be something greater than yourself that you make your children believe in. That's important to their development. That when you look at it that way, then it sends a different kind of message about the importance of the celebration of Mother's Day. Because now Mother's Day is a day that those who love you simply have said it, not for the first time, but are now saying it publicly for everybody. So in my house, we celebrated Mother's Day every day. In my house, we believe every day that there was no person more important, but just as important than our mother. In our house, we believe that Mother's Day was important, and based on that belief, we celebrate it. And I'm hoping that next year we will celebrate Mother's Day, not because it is a holiday, but because it is the right day to do it. So on behalf of Shirley Johnson, Geneva Lewis, Lola Carey, and Gloria Gator, and Mary Lou Fair, happy Mother's Day, and I'll see you next week.
Keep on, keep going. I need you to keep on going. Keep on going. Keep on going. Keep on going. We've been hated, degraded, and talked about most of our lives. But we've made it still standing 'cause they can't destroy what's inside. Black people keep going.